Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Republican Party Network. We have a brief uh, dis discussion today, presentation on Saul Alinsky. I know that quite a few of you are familiar with Saul Alinsky, but I hope that the information I'm going to share with you today is something a little bit different than maybe what you're used to, and also how Saul Alinsky and some of his ideas and thinking can be used to transform the Republican Party into a activist, action-oriented party. And so let's get started. We'll share this right now with you, and hopefully this works. Okay, here we go. So as I indicated, we're going to look at Alinsky from the Republican way. This is a very brief introduction to a number of things that we'll be dealing with down the road. And we think that it'll be something that'll be of interest to you. What we're going to briefly talk about in this session is, first of all, Lucifer and deficit thinking. Lucifer and deficit thinking from Alinsky's perspective. I think you'll find that kind of intriguing. The next thing is we're going to give a little bit of an example of the rules for radicals. I'm sure, again, some of you are familiar with that book. We're going to talk about 3 specific examples. We were going to do breakout rooms, but we're not going to do that in this session because there is no audience for this session. But one of the things that we like to do with the Republican Party Network is to really have it engaging. This session right now is just between you and me. In other words, we're just recording it with no audience or no participation. So we won't have any breakout sessions. But in the future, we're going to do a lot of engaging and interacting. So that's what we want to have for most of the presentations, the sessions on the Republican Party Network. We're also then going to talk a little bit about the Alinsky legacy, what that means, not only for the Republican Party, but basically what's happening to the country. The Alinsky legacy is alive and well, as most of us probably know. Then we'll briefly touch on a culture of success, how we can restore American values, political, economic, and social values in our country, and then look quickly at next steps. So let's begin. Saul Alinsky dedicated his book, Rules for Radicals, as some of you may know, to Lucifer. And Lucifer, for most part, in terms of how we look at it, is closely connected to what I believe we call deficit thinking. In other words, problems, obstacles, challenges, however you want to frame it, is what Alinsky was all about. He spent his life, he dedicated his life to searching for problems. That's where he received his energy, and that's where he was energized. One could interpret why he decided to dedicate Rules for Radicals to Lucifer is because Lucifer, obviously, metaphorically at least, if not in real terms, is the epitome of deficits, problems. The devil basically is here to, for the most part, show us what we cannot do, show us that we are lacking, show us that we are inferior in many respects, that we're victims of this world. And Alinsky thrived off of that, He was asked towards the end of his life, was he really serious about the notion of dedicating Rules for Radicals to Lucifer, or was this some kind of a tongue-in-cheek exercise? And he was very serious about it. And from our perspective, Lucifer really is the epitome of what we see now on the left. It certainly is grounded in Marxism, and we're seeing that everywhere. When you go around the country, when you just a cursory review, you see that the only thing that the Democrats, the left, the socialists, the Marxists, however you want to frame them, the only thing that they're interested is in problems. And the thing is about this, What is really the message for us is there's never an end. And like Lucifer, it's pervasive, it's everywhere if you allow it. And evil, in that sense, feeds on itself. Problems feed on themselves. And I think if you look around now in America's society, the left is constantly going from one deficit, one problem to the next. Even when, in some respects, problems are solved, they look to another. They thrive off it. This is where they get their energy. But here's the most interesting part about this, and this is where we can learn so much, is that the energy that they receive is from us. It's from us. And when we fight them on their terms, when we fight the Democratic left on their terms, they take our energy. They exhaust us. And we're seeing that now in the Republican Party. Alienation, frustration, anger, fear. And the reason for that is that all of the energy that we have, all the vitality that we have is being taken. It's being sucked up by the Democratic left. And we are left then as simply victims of what's going on. We feel that we don't have any control, we don't have any power, we don't have the ability to fight them. And many folks are simply just going into themselves and not really thinking that there's anything they can do. I mean, all we have to do is just look at the mask epidemic. That's really the epidemic that's out there. Certainly, one could say at this point that the science doesn't support it anymore. And yet we're still wearing these masks. We're going around with them. And this is what Alinsky wanted. This is his focus. And in that sense, in real terms, Lucifer is very much in our midst because we've allowed this deficit thinking to control us. So what we want to do now is kind of talk about a little bit how we're going to respond to it. And we're going to look at three of the rules for radicals, just as an example, kind of a tease, as it were, to how we respond to it. One of them, the first one is make the enemy live it up to its own book of rules. Make the enemy live up to its own book of rules. And we'll talk briefly about that. Second is, Alinsky rule is keep the pressure on. The third one is pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. So those are the three that we're going to look at very briefly. First one, make the enemy live up to its own book of rules. In this case, you look for contradictions, you point out hypocrisies, you look at behaviors that are contradictory, you pay attention to consequences, and you challenge the credibility and reputation of folks. So from the Republican perspective, we are looking at what the Democrats are doing, what the left is doing, and we need to make them live up to their rules. We need to make them live up to their rules 24/7 for the contradictions, the hypocrisy. We need to look at their behaviors and how those behaviors are not consistent with what they say. And we need to pay attention to consequences. How are the behaviors that they're performing? What's happening as a result of that? And then finally, we need to challenge them at every level. Now, from a Republican perspective, we don't do this. Bottom line is we simply don't do this. And we need to begin as a Republican Party at all levels, focus on the Democrats in this perspective. We need to make it clear in precise terms that the Democrats are not living up to their rules. In the rhetoric we use, how we talk to our neighbors, how we talk to the media, how we talk to each other, the decisions we make. And so therefore, instead of the Democrats going after us and taking our energy, we need to go on the attack of them. And we need to do that in every way, certainly at the grassroots level. But one of the interests that we have in the Republican Party network is to begin having our state Republican chairs in every state Republican chair start focusing on the Democrats in this fashion. In other words, just to say that the Democrats are wrong, just to say that the Democrats are foolish, or there's no common sense, or they're hurting America means nothing. We have to get very specific and make it clear in every statement we make that the Democrats are not living up to their own rules. And our party leaders need to do that at the state level. And of course, the Republican National Committee, the 150 some odd individuals that represent the top leadership of the Republican Party must start doing this. And of course, they're not doing it now. Keep the pressure on. We don't do this very well at all. Everything that we do in the Republican Party network is going to have a call to action. In other words, we're not just interested in hearing a speech, may be very entertaining, may be very informative, may be very enlightening, but the bottom line is there has to be a call to action. Because we focus so much on Republican clubs, that's the real center and the target of all of our energy in the Republican Party network. Clubs need to start not just having speakers and presenters, but they need to have a call to action. When you bring in someone, for example, talking about the border, there needs to be a call to action after that speaker. What are we going to do? How are we now going to use this information in a way that we can begin to get the Republican Party viewed as an activist, action-oriented party? The next thing is we need to have an escalation of tactics. It has to be slowly, but it has to be an escalation. We start simply. We start things that people are comfortable with. We're not talking about getting in the face of people. We're not talking about being rude. We're not talking about doing any of the things that the Democrats are doing, which are horrible. But we are saying we need to get out of our comfort zone a little bit and start moving forward. And this has to be all demographics, not just folks that are in their 30s and 40s. It needs to be all of us. This is all of us, our responsibility. We also then need to have an appearance of power as we place pressure on Democrats and the left. And the way you do that is to organize. The way you do that is to bring people together. You can have 50,000 individuals write a letter or an email or a phone call to a legislator. And those 50,000 may have some impact. But if those 50,000 are coming from the Republican Party network or a club or several clubs or clubs that are in a state, it means significantly much more power. Commitment to our issues. One of the things that I find most interesting is there's a call amongst some Republicans that we simply have to increase the number of precinct committeemen. We just need more conservatives. We just need more people to shout, more people to write letters and around our issues. And that would be great if it worked, but it just doesn't. The election fraud, which we all saw, resulted in thousands and thousands of Republicans out there, conservative-minded people protesting. But the problem with it is there was no commitment beyond the protest. We have to continually have action. We have to continually have a plan. We have to never give up and keep moving on. If the other side knows that we're going to meet on Monday and that's it, they can simply wait us out. They can simply wait us out. The other part of this is that we have a Republican Party platform, a wonderful platform. States have wonderful positions on that they've taken on issues, but in many ways they're a mile wide and an inch deep, a mile wide and an inch deep. Bottom line is that there's no real commitment to those issues. We have 36, maybe 37 Republican state legislatures that could now quickly solve the election fraud problem. They could solve the election fraud problem. Why aren't they doing it? They have the votes. We have Republican governors. Why aren't we doing voter ID in every state? Why aren't we doing same-day voting in every state? Why aren't we eliminating this nonsense of weeks and weeks for voting? Why are we not doing that? That's a question that we have to figure out. But one of the reasons we're not is because there simply is no commitment. Finally, we have to have confidence and loyalty to the issues, to our cause. And that means constantly being vigilant, constantly being vigilant. And through the Republican Party network, that's one of the things that we're going to be doing, connecting with each other, finding strategies that work. And the way we do that is by talking with each other through the relationships we establish. And from that, great things then come about. Finally, the last one, pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. That is a rule that the other side does extremely well. Just look how they treated the president of the United States, Donald Trump, for 4 years, and even when he was running for office. They targeted him, they froze him, they personalized it, and they polarized it. It was a classic in terms of Alinsky's rule. But I think we also say that on the other side, President Trump is used Alinsky's rules as a master. Every time he spoke, he targeted who the enemies truly were. And that's why a lot of folks didn't like him, because they made him uncomfortable. The president made people uncomfortable because he told the truth. And this is one way to tell the truth. The target is the Democrat. For example, here's an example in terms of the border issue. Our target's the Democratic Party in Southern Arizona. We freeze the target from the border to our communities. The Southern Arizona Democrats have voted against keeping us safe. That's what we're saying. It's frozen, it's there, it's clear what our position is. We personalize it. Every Arizonan, every family, every child is at risk because of the Southern Arizona Democratic policies and votes. It's pretty clear. And this is true. And then finally, we polarize the target. We must defeat the Democrats if we are to keep Arizona safe from drugs, violence, and rape and murder. That's how you target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize. This is one example. We're not talking like that. We're not talking like that at all. And certainly our leaders are not putting it in those terms. It has to be in those terms if we're going to be successful. So those are some of the things in how we look at the rules. But let's talk about then how we can actually apply some of this. And this is what the Alinsky legacy is right now, and for the Democratic Party. And then we're going to talk about Republicans. At the top there, you see the Democrats look for deficits in our communities all over the country, as we talked about earlier in terms of Lucifer and what that means, what that really means in terms of Alinsky and why he valued Lucifer so much. Looking for deficits, evil, what's going on. Think about how the Democrats talk about racism today. They have now portrayed white Americans as evil, racists, horrible people. If that's not Lucifer, I don't know what is. So the Democrats look for deficits. They look in for our communities. And then as they talk to community members, they talk to moms and dads and neighbors and people who are seniors and people who are young and college students, you name it. We all know this. And they tell them, these are your problems. We feel your pain. We understand, and we're going to fix it for you. We're going to fix it for you. And you know that's happening. And of course, that's how government grows. And that then becomes a culture of dependency. And that's what is in existence now. You use the rules of Alinsky to create this culture of dependency. And as they use this, they have their bad guy, they have their evil, they have their individual group, in this case, with regard to racism, white Americans. And we will fix this. We will fix this. And what are they doing? Indoctrinating our kids. What are they doing? They're going into the workplace, telling whites that you are racist. You need to change your behavior. How many times have we seen over the past year adults, adults that, look pretty responsible, on their knees saying they are sorry for being racist. A culture of dependency. We depend on government. All right. What do we do as Republicans? We look for strengths on the bottom part there. We look for strengths. What's great about our communities? What's great about people in our communities? What are they doing that's working? What do they have their talents and their strengths that are going untapped because of an education system for our kids that is an absolute failure? What are we doing in terms of jobs? For example, the Republicans say, or rather the Democrats say, they're bringing in all these illegals. What they're doing is they're destroying the job market. And we say to folks, look, regardless of who you are, you have these great talents, you have these great strengths, you can do good work, but you're not going to get a good paying job because of the fact that you have all these illegals coming in. And we want you to be able to take your strengths, your skills, your knowledge, get a good job. So we're going to create opportunities for you. We're not going to do it for you. We are creating opportunities. And we saw with President Trump with opportunity zones. This was a classic example of what we're talking about. This is not theory. This is real. And the president did this with opportunity zones all over the country. And what he did was, in an elegant fashion, he created these opportunity zones in communities, saying to the people in those communities, you work hard, you get the skills, you take your raw talents and develop them, we're going to have opportunities for you. And he had other corporations invest in these communities through tax incentives, through getting rid of all these ridiculous and excessive regulations. And as a result, a culture of success develops. That's what we are as Republicans. That's what we're doing. And we use the rules that Alinsky gave us, as I talked in the previous examples, to explain this. It's not easy, but it can be done. And our president showed us that it was very possible. Finally, when we look at a culture of success, as we just talked about, this is how we begin. You start with house meeting conversations. This is very simple. It's just your neighbors. We're not talking about anything extravagant. You talk to your neighbors, not about being Republican, not about being Democrat, but simply the issues. It can be potholes, it can be taxes, it can be regulations, it can be safety in the community, it can be the school, and you just have general conversation. Invite them over for dinner, invite them over for a glass of wine or a cup of coffee or some tea, or just even talk to each other over the fence and say, hey, why don't we bring a couple, 2, 3 of our neighbors together and just talk about some of these things. Everybody likes to give their opinion. Everybody likes to talk about things. And as long as you keep it out of partisan politics, you have a good chance of getting people together. And then we educate around these issues. We listen to people's opinions. We talk about it. We hear what's going on. Now, if they say something that's not accurate, we need to be making sure that we provide information. And then we organize around these issues by telling folks opportunities exist. Opportunities exist. We can do something about this. Well, how can we? Well, if you do this and I do that, let's put together some ideas and maybe we got some opportunities to change some things. And if it really affects them, if these issues are really important, they will do it. They will do it. And so then you move to mobilizing around this and mobilizing for success. Okay, why don't we try doing this? Why don't we try doing that? And in the weeks and months ahead, we're going to give you specific examples of how all this is being done. And the focus is on the Republican clubs. Let's not forget that, because you might be saying, well, where's this going to happen? How are we going to do that? We have thousands of Republican clubs in this country. And this is the place that we need to start talking to each other about strategies to educate, to organize, and to mobilize so we have successful opportunities for everyone to change things and create a culture of success. And here's the payoff. We then connect these issues, after we mobilize around them, getting things done to candidates. And that's the payoff. And no longer then are we Republican or Democrat in that sense. We have all of these issues out here connected, of course, to our candidates who are Republican and people who might be independent. They might be alienated from the Republican Party. They might be lukewarm about the Republican Party. But if they see issues that are important to them, they will connect it to those candidates. And that's how we get folks elected. But that's also how we get candidates now driven by these issues, and therefore they're much more likely to support the issues, have commitment to the issues, vote for the issues, and not leave us behind in the dust. And you continue then with the house parties, and these house meetings rather, and you can have house parties. And that's how we do this. I'm throwing a lot at you here. I'm talking about a lot of things, but this is, as I said, just a tease. But this is what the Republican Party network is about. And again, we have a place to do these things. Thousands of Republican clubs in this country, hundreds in each state. And we have to move from beyond just entertainment of a speaker, getting excited. Oh, that was interesting. Really glad what he or she said. And then the next minute we walk, we go have dinner, we forget about it, and it's over. We've got to do more than that. Or the Democrats, the left, the Marxists, the globalists, however you want to frame it, are going to win. It's not a question of if, but when they will win. This is a war of attrition. All they have to do is make a few gains every year. And that's what we're about. We've got to stop them. So next steps. When you view this, and you'll see the comments section, give me your feedback. I need to know what you're thinking. I need to know your ideas. What do you agree with? What do you don't agree with? What do you want us to see more of? This is not some top-down approach. We're in this together. Just like you, we care. I care. I'm concerned. I'm doing this because I care about our country, and I know you do too. Register for other Republican Party network events. Come to them. Engage with other folks on the network. Get your friends and neighbors to join the network. Get your Republican clubs involved with the network. And as I said, post your comments in the topic areas. On the left side, you'll see topics. Go into them. This is the key. This is where we are. Alinsky did leave us a legacy, whether we like it or not. I've had a few folks who say, I'm not going to watch Alinsky. And I'm saying to them, you need to. You need to know what we were up against. But we can turn it around. We can take Alinsky's thinking and make it the Republican way. As I say, we take all of the ideas from the left and use them for the right reasons. We've got to do this. So thank you very much. I'm glad that you watched this. I hope it was informative. And this is just the beginning. And again, please post your comments and thoughts and ideas. And we will be back with you soon. Thank you very much. And take good care. God bless.